CEOs are announcing RTO plans, return to office. That's the new mantra, that's the new buzzword, RTO. But wait, just a few years ago, wasn't everyone celebrating Zoom and the rise of remote work? What's going on? You have some people saying that it'll never work. People are never going to come back to the office, especially full-time. Meanwhile, others are saying return to the office is necessary for collaboration, camaraderie, and company growth. So which is it? I've been on both sides of the equation, and as a remote software engineer and as someone that's managed remote technologist, this is one of those things that has its advantages and disadvantages. You'll get a different answer depending on who you ask. Remote employees love the flexibility of working remotely, rolling out of bed in their PJs and logging on. They enjoy not having to sit in traffic to and from the office. They feel like they have more personal time for things like family and friends. Who wouldn't want these benefits? These are the people screaming, my company wants to promote a positive work-life balance. I feel like I have that now. Why would they want to take that away? And they wouldn't be wrong. But we wouldn't be honest if we didn't tell the other side of the story. For every all-star employee working remotely, they'll also tell you that they have an insane amount of work. They work an insane amount of hours. Working 9 to 5, well, that's more like a recommendation. You're never really off the clock. The taboo about calling people off hours, well, that's gone. These days, people will absolutely call you after hours, during dinner, whenever. Off the clock doesn't really mean off the clock. But for every all-star employee that you have, how many not-so-stellar employees do you have? That's really the question, isn't it? Are most of your employees average or stellar? How many are below average? And you don't need to be a manager to know this. As a remote employee myself, I've run into my share of unresponsive people. According to Teams, this person is always green, showing available. But every time I reach out, I get a response 3 hours later like, sorry, I didn't see this. Really? Every time? Or what about meetings? Let's say you need to speak to someone specific. You set up a meeting around their calendar. 15 minutes before the meeting, you get a message, meeting declined, I'm double booked, can we reschedule? No, I'm waiting to speak to you. I scheduled around your calendar, now you're tied up. It's super frustrating, but what's worse is that it holds up timelines, it holds up deliverables. So at the end of the week, when status is reported to management, what do they hear? We have a delay in a project because we require input from so-and-so. From a manager's perspective, this is infuriating. What do you mean we're waiting on so-and-so? Go walk over to their desk and tap them on the shoulder. Oh, he works remotely. Great. How many times does a manager need to hear that before saying, we need to bring people back to the office? When a remote employee works effectively, no one notices. It's what you're supposed to do. You were hired to work and you're doing that. But when there's an issue, that's the message that gets escalated to upper management. And normally, in that type of situation, what happens? The manager has a conversation with that employee, reinforces expectation, and advises him to step up his game. But how do you do that when someone works remotely? You could make all the same moves and say all the same things, but it doesn't translate the same over a Zoom meeting. Unfortunately, it's the bad apples that get all the attention. And let's be honest, it's more than just a few bad apples. When the pandemic came, everyone rushed to remote work for safety reasons. Everyone that was able to work remotely was forced to work remotely. Everyone, not just the all-stars, not just the people capable of doing so, but everyone. Even jobs that were never meant to be remote were now remote. It was too much, too fast. It was a necessary evil. We all did what we needed to do, but we also opened Pandora's box. Now, all these people that probably shouldn't be working remotely, well, they got used to it. All those jobs that shouldn't be remote, well, people became used to it. Early on, people were tolerant and understanding about certain working conditions, but now, it's a different ballgame. All those people that shouldn't be working remotely, shouldn't they come back to the office? All those jobs that shouldn't be remote, shouldn't they come back? On paper, that's the logical choice. Unfortunately, life isn't on paper and things aren't always logical. And let's not forget, those people I said that shouldn't work remotely, that also includes management. Things change fast and furious for managers too. Prior to the pandemic, how many managers were actually equipped to handle remote staff? Things changed from one day to the next, and they're left sitting there staring at their computer screens. How about upper management and executives? These are all people with high levels of responsibility, and they're out there on an island by themselves. It's not a comfortable place to be. But it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all hopeless. People are so used to the way things are now that they forget that this used to be a thing. Remote jobs were out there prior to the pandemic. I worked remotely as early as 2005, so this is not new. But the rules are different now, and this is the part that's causing problems. Pre-pandemic, you understood that you had to maintain a professional work environment. Period. If you couldn't agree to that, then you would be let go. Simple. Today, it's not so simple. Just because you're technically able to work from anywhere doesn't mean that it's professional to do so. That means don't work at Starbucks one day and then from a friend's house the next and then from the beach with your toes in the sand, all while posting pictures on Instagram. That's not a good look. It's this lack of professionalism that I referred to when I said we opened Pandora's box. We've all been in meetings with dogs barking in the background or kids screaming in the background, or how about those people taking Zoom calls from their phone while driving? Apologies, I can't see the screen share. I'm attending from my phone. These are all things that you don't normally have to deal with when everyone works from the office. In the past, you had rockstar remote teams because everyone knew the consequences. You only hired people that were equipped for that type of work, and if they weren't, you cut them loose. Then, from the manager's perspective, the manager also had to be equipped to deal with remote staff. That means clearly defined tasks, daily conversations with the teams to understand how things are flowing. Agile methodologies come to mind. But now, far too many unequipped people are working remotely. People have forgotten that working remotely is a privilege. Remote work is not for everyone. It's not for every role. It's not for every industry. I'm a director of software engineering. I like working remotely. I love working remotely. I absolutely hate going to the office. But my role requires me to go to the office. I wouldn't be effective if I didn't go to the office. My role requires me to be a decision maker. I need to talk to other decision makers. Everyone is always super busy. Sometimes you may just need 5 minutes with an executive. That conversation starts like this. I need to run something by you. We can walk and talk at the same time. Then there's another piece to this remote work versus RTO argument that gets overlooked. Most decision makers, upper management, executives, they all tend to work from the office. They need to be available. Their day may or may not be full of impromptu meetings and discussions. So from their perspective, they would probably like to have everyone back in the office. I mean, why wouldn't they? It's normal for them. But the level of tolerance toward remote work has greatly increased during the pandemic. It all comes down to balance. At the end of it all, unfortunately, there are people working remotely that shouldn't. This is something that needs to be resolved. But do we really think people will be expected to come to the office 5 days a week? I doubt it. We just need to get back to some semblance of normalcy. If you want to work remotely, make sure you work in a role or an industry that can work remotely. Technology lends itself well for remote work. Don't expect to work from home if you're a cashier, for example. From a resourcing perspective, we need to bring professionalism back to the workplace. How do we do that? This is really the cornerstone of this entire argument. If people can deliver on time, every time, and this includes managers, do you really think that a CEO cares where that employee sits physically? In the past, sure, absolutely. But post-pandemic, most executives couldn't care less. But the key is delivering on time every time. So that means if a client wants to schedule a 3 p.m. meeting on Friday afternoon, you say, okay. You don't say, I can't do it then, I'm working remotely. In order for remote work to truly work, people can't feel like you're working remotely. So it's up to us, all of us, to bring professionalism back to the workplace. So yes, right now, RTO is on everyone's mind. But that doesn't spell the end of remote work. In fact, there's never been more tolerance for remote work. We just need to smooth out some of the rough edges. Trust me, I'd love to work from some yacht in the Bahamas. But how effective would I really be? After all, that's really what we're talking about. Effectiveness in the workplace, whether that workplace is remote or in the office. Watch this video to see my thoughts on the new norm.